Hello everyone, welcome back to On the Spot STEM. Today we'll be going over AIME 1 and 2 last minute tips and strategies. And this is not a video that tells you how to prepare for the AIME, rather it's more of a strategies video as indicated by the title. And there's really not much you can do with just a week left from AIME 1 and about 2 weeks left from AIME 2. I mean, you can pick up a topic or two, but ultimately you're not going to be able to learn a lot of material. And your best bet is to just go into AIME and try to solve as many as you can. The good thing about AIME is that unlike other college math competitions, AIME is not very theory heavy. It's more reliant on you knowing basic skills and being able to apply them to very complex problems. So you don't have to know a lot for AIME theory-wise. Just be able to apply it in the time that they give you. So what we're going to talk about today is a summary of AMC 10 and 12 this year and how they might play into AIME. Predictions of test difficulty and cutoff, and also AIME 1 versus AIME 2. We'll be talking about test strategies and what types of strategies there are and what you should be aiming for, and what you should do the day before the test. And so just a disclaimer here, I'm not extremely qualified to talk about AIME because I didn't get like a 15 or anything, but I did get a 10 last year, so I'm sort of qualified to talk about AIME and I sort of know how the test works. So let's talk about AMC 10 and 12 this year. 10A and 10B both had the lowest cutoff in history. 10B cutoff was I think 102 and 10A cutoff was 103.5. That was very low. 102 was lowest in history, and then 12A, 12B cutoffs were both 87. Last year cutoff was 84 for 12A, but that doesn't really make a difference. The more important thing to focus on here is DHR. So the interesting thing is that most people thought that 10B was a lot harder than 10A and 12B was a lot harder than 12A. But somehow 12A DHR was 123 and then 12B DHR was 120 or 121.5. And then 10A and 10B DHR were also very close to each other. Despite everyone, or at least most people thinking the 12B was a lot harder than 12A and 10B a lot harder than 10A. And this basically plays into the concept of B bias, an unofficial term. And B bias is basically the fact that only about half as many people take the AMCB each year, half to 2/3. Last year it was closer to 1/2. So only about half as many people take it. And basically, the students who take it just for the sake of it, they usually only take the A. And the more motivated students take the B. So the average pool of people that take the B is usually better than the average pool of people that take the A. And so that's why even with a harder test, the statistics might show that the two tests were similar in difficulty, but it's just that the test-taking population is very significant between the A and the B. So that's important to realize. And B bias actually plays into USUMO and JMO cutoffs also, because generally the AMCB cutoffs for JMO and USUMO have almost always been higher than the AMCA cutoffs, despite years with much harder tests, and so that's just how it is. So now let's talk cutoffs. So this is a very big chart here, but I'll break it down for you guys. Basically, in this first sort of cell, or in this first sort of block, we have the AIME score you needed to get into Olympiad, and the AIME score you need is from DHR. So if you scored DHR and you were in 2018, and you took the AIME 2 when you took 10B, you'd need DHR and then an 8.9 on AIME to get Olympiad. And you can't score fractional points on AIME, they're all integers, but this is just calculated by taking the Olympiad cutoff minus the DHR over 10, because AIME points, or AIME questions are each worth 10 points. And the second block is 10A, and the second block is all cutoffs for 10A, 12A, 12B, 10B, and then the third block is DHR for all these years. And so, as I was saying earlier, you can see that the DHRs are generally very close, if not higher, for the B cutoff, or for the B test, despite similar or harder difficulty. And also, cutoffs for the B are generally very brutal compared to the A. If you look at these years, I'm not going to go into details over each individual cell, but we'll link this spreadsheet in the description so you guys can look at it for future reference if you want. But that's basically it. And then one important thing to note is that for AIME, most of the time, or about half, maybe a bit less than half the time, if you got DHR on the AMC 10, a 9 on AIME would get you into Olympiad. It might be a little bit less than half the time, but a 10 on AIME from AMC 10 will always guarantee you if you got DHR. So if you got anything DHR or above, a 10 will always guarantee you unless you took AMC 10 in 2015, in which this cell was greater than 10. But every other time, if you got DHR or greater and a 10, you would make it into Olympiad. So if you take the AMC 10, I think, and you got around DHR, I think 10 would be a very reasonable, if you want to make Olympiad, 10 would be a very reasonable goal. And for 12, obviously, since everyone takes the same AIME, 12 takers are generally better than 10 takers because they're older. And so you generally need a 10 at least, if not an 11. Some years you needed an 11, or just some places, as in 2019 12B. And that goes back to the concept of B bias. 12B in 2019 was regarded as harder, but it shows 11 over here, and that's higher than the 12A. And also AIME 2, you generally need more on AIME with AIME 2 than AIME 1, and I'll go into that in a second. So let's talk about test difficulty and 1 versus 2. So MAA claims that they start the drafting and problem selection process 3 years in advance, and I've seen posts by problem creators where they're like, oh, I proposed this around 3 years ago, and it showed up on AIME this year, so I think that's probably around true. And MAA also claims that it writes the 2 tests and flips a coin to choose the 1 and the 2, so the difficulty should be about, like, on average the same. One thing to notice is that generally in the past 5 or 6 years, when it was an even year, the AIME 1 has been hard, and when it was an odd year, the AIME 1 has been easy or easier. Like 2019, 2017, and 2015 all had easier AIMEs than 2018, 2016, and 2014 for the 1. It's just general consensus. It's not necessarily true. It's depending on what your strengths and weaknesses are. And people also say that AIME 2 is generally harder than AIME 1, but if MA claims that it writes 2 tests and flips a coin, I think this is more of a placebo effect. It's probably not true, it's just what people perceive, but I could be wrong. And let's also talk subject distribution. So, last year, the AIME 1 and 2 had a lot of geometry, especially. I think that's what most users noted after the test, and they had less combinatorics. So this year, there'll probably be more combo on the AIMEs and less geometry. But of course, there's no way to tell again because this process is very randomish, and there's no deterministic way to see, okay, there's going to be this many geometry problems on the AIME this year. So take all of this with a grain of salt. It's just general consensus and just speculation. So let's talk about test strategies now. There are 2 strategies, the Horde and the Conservative. You might recognize these strategies from the AMC 10B and 12B last minute tips video. But we took out the balance for this because there's really only 2 different strategies you can go for on AIME. And a lot of people who barely got into AIME, like if you barely got into AIME, you probably need around a 12 or 13 for Olympiad qualification. If not more. For AMC 12, you definitely need like a 14 if you got an 87. But, so a lot of people just aim for around 5 or 6 because 6 on AIME is pretty respectable. You still need like a decent amount of skill to get a 6 on AIME. And I think AIME average is around a 5 and AIME median is a 5. Last year, the AIME 1 average was about 5.8 if I remember correctly. Or you might be aiming for Olympiad qualification. And so we'll talk about the strategies now. So the Horde is basically going through the 1 through 10 in the first hour, and then you spend 1.5 to 2 hours trying to get the last 2 to 3 in the last 5, and double check around your last 20 minutes. And basically, the benefits of this is that if you get all the problems correct that you try, you'll end up with like an 11 or 12 at least. If you aren't as confident about AIME, but you think you can still solve around 9 or 10, then you'd want to get around 1 to 8 in the first hour, and then spend a bunch of time trying to get 2 or 3 in the last few correct. And it honestly just depends on your goal, what your goal is, and you can modify as necessary. But once again, it's extremely rewarding if you get all these questions correct. But the downside is you have only around 20 minutes to check. And 20 minutes may seem a lot when you're talking about AMC, but AIME's 3 hours, and these problems are generally very involved, very complex, and so 20 minutes isn't really enough time to check all the problems that you're going to be doing. It's not enough time to check 10 problems versus in AMC 20 minutes would be a lot. So that's important to keep in mind. There's also the conservative, and basically in this scenario you're taking no risks. You're going to be solving enough problems for your goal in your first around 1.5 hours, 1.5, maybe a bit more, a bit less. Then you'll check for the rest of the test. This is very important because a lot of people make a lot more sillies on AIME than AMC because AIME is just brutal in that sense. I don't really know why. Maybe it's because it's a short answer format. On the topic of guessing for AIME, I'll get to that a bit later. But essentially, in the conservative, you'll be checking for the rest of the test. And if you spend half your time checking, you minimize the risk of making stupid mistakes. And the downside is you might see a problem that looks intimidating at first, and since you're going slow, you might not try it, and then realize it's pretty easy and you could have gotten it later on. So, but I think it's still good to take a strategy that minimizes your chance of silly mistakes. I went this strategy last year on AIME 1, and I solved 1 through 10, and I basically checked for the rest of the time. After the test, I basically got 11 and 12, but I think it was more worth to check for a lot of time than spend a lot of time solving number 11 and number 12. So before I get to the day before the test, I'll just make a brief note about guessing. AIME is technically it's technically a multiple choice contest because you have 1,000 answers for 1,000 choices for each question, so it's multiple choice in that sense. But I think a lot of people know that it's really not multiple choice, and so you're probably not gonna get lucky, just statistically speaking, when you're guessing on AIME. But I think some people did some data analysis either way, and they found that the most common answers lie between 1 and 100. And so if you're gonna guess, I guess guess something between 1 and 100. There's really no point trying to guess a problem, like looking at it for a few minutes and seeing if you could guess it correct, because that's probably not going to work out. But statistically speaking, guess something from 1 to 100 if you are going to. And now the day before the test, people either grind or they just take a chill. Like last year, I'm pretty sure I did an AIME the day before the test, and some of my friends also did an AIME, while other friends just shut down and just slept and took rest. Both scenarios can make you successful. I mean, some of my friends that grinded were successful, and some of them who took a chill were also successful. So it just matters on what suits you. Try to get decent sleep, but again, as I said in the AMC video, sleep doesn't really affect performance unless you get an abnormally different amount of sleep. So if you're going around 6 to 7 hours a day, don't get 10 hours of sleep the day before AIME. Maybe get 8. Or don't get less than 4. But if you're going 9 hours a day on sleep, don't get 6 hours a day before AIME. Try to stay around that optimal range, maybe a bit more or a bit less, or probably a bit more. And also, remember not to discuss unless you've thoroughly made sure that the other person already took the test, or just wait until tomorrow. I've heard instances where people have shared AIME answer keys with other people, or shared part of them when the other person actually hasn't took yet, and so that gets a lot of cheating involved and all these incidents, so it's just best not to stay out of that and just to play it safe. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, comment them down below. And again, I showed the table earlier in the video, but I'll link that spreadsheet in the description, which is just cutoff analysis for that has computations for JMO and USMO cutoffs. And so you guys can see what AIME score you need given DHR for all these years, and then AMC and stuff, and then you can speculate what you might need for this year. Personally, I think USMO cutoff for the A and 1 will be around 215 to 225, maybe a bit more. It really depends on how hard AIME is. And AMC 12B cutoff will probably be around 230 plus, just knowing how brutal B cutoff has been for USMO in the past few years. And then JMO cutoff will be probably around 210 to 220, give or take, probably add 5 to them maybe. I haven't really looked at the AMC test much for 10, so I don't really know. And again, this is all my speculation. It's not like this is official or anything, so just take this all with a grain of salt. And if you have any questions, comment them down below, and we'll be happy to answer. Thank you for watching, and remember to like and subscribe.